6 teams are on a bye. Quarterbacks are getting injured and maybe getting benched. Wide receivers are certainly getting injured. You know what you need? You need the waiver wire, and you need Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. I am Adam Aizer. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. And maybe you want Cade Otton or Tez Johnson. Maybe you're looking at the Texans receiving core right now. We've got answers for you. We have solutions. Hello, good afternoon to Dave and Jamey. Who has more? Let's play a quick round of who has more. Who has more games with double-digit PPR fantasy points? Sam Laporta or Cade Otton?
Cade Otton.
I think it's Otton.
Oh, man, it's a tie. It is a tie. They both have 3.
You can't do that. And who has more?
Why not?
You can't do who has tie.
Jack talk tie, but there are ties in football. There are ties in who has more. What am I supposed to say? How are you guys doing? Any 7-0 squads? Jamey, guillotine leagues do not count.
1.
You got 1 left at 7-0. Good for you. I have a bunch of 6-1s. I feel good about those.
Very good. Very good. All right, let's get to our top waiver wire. I don't have any waiver wire priorities. Jamey, start with you. You're giving me your top 3 at any position.
The Colts DST would be 1 with their matchup against the Tennessee Titans. I would spend all the fab in the world if I needed a DST for this week based on that matchup. I'm going to look at Oronde Gadsden with his long-term appeal as well as his short-term appeal. He's been very good the last 2 games, and I think we're going to see the Chargers throwing the ball a lot. And then you said it, Adam. Quarterback could be one of the biggest issues this week with the teams that are on a bye and some of the guys who have been struggling and or getting benched. So Joe Flacco, back-to-back games with over 22 fantasy points, taking on the Jets this week. I think there could be some long-term appeal for Mr. Flacco.
I like a lot of this list. In fact, the Colts defense, Gadsden, you can make the case for those 2 to be the top 2 priorities. But what fun is agreeing with you when I can just come up with a different list of 3? So I've got 3 wide receivers for week 8 only that I like. And it's Tez Johnson 1, Darnell Mooney 2, and then Marvin Mims. It's only because of the matchup against Dallas. And I think Mims is due for an uptick in playing time after how he was a hero in the 4th quarter last week. Troy Franklin caught a touchdown. It was off a tip. He had a drop in the game. He ran a wrong route in the game. I think Mims is in line to see a little bit more work. And it's a high-scoring game. But these are the 3 receivers that I would look at. And I think everybody in every fantasy league is going to look at Tez Johnson and probably spend a lot of fab to get him. I don't mind doing that if you need to win now, but if you're thinking rest of season, I don't know if Tez Johnson is going to be a guy that can be a league winner because we know that Chris Godwin will eventually come back for whatever that's worth. Jalen McMillan, remember him? He was awesome last year for Tampa. He's going to come back at some point. He could be a couple weeks away. And then there's that one other guy that the Bucs still have that he's healthy, Emeka Egbuka. I know we've all heard of him. We know that he's going to end up being, like he was in Week 7, the top target getter for this passing game. So Tez Johnson's exciting. I just wouldn't go crazy to get him unless you need somebody for this week, and then you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I went and did all my waivers before the show, and what I found was because of all the buys, because of all the injuries, I'm looking at a lot of leagues where I'm trying to pick up another tight end to start at flex. So Cade Otton and Dalton Schultz and Oronde Gadsden became big priorities for me. So tight ends are coming up later in the show, but certainly because of injuries, we do have some good options on the waiver wire. By the way, Jamey, you wouldn't really spend all that much fab on the Colts, right?
I would if I need a win this week, absolutely.
Oh, come on. You can't spend all your fab on a DST.
I mean, they may be one of the top 5 scorers this week. Have you seen Cam Ward play football?
Yeah, but just you can't spend all your fab on a DST. I can't allow it. Come on now.
You spend 15% of your fab on the DST.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. If I need to win, absolutely. Yes.
Everybody needs to win.
Well,
there's sitting here watching going, I don't need to win.
There's need to win, and then there's need to win. You know, you're 2-5, you're 3-4, and your team's struggling. I mean, if you have to get something that's going to help guarantee a win, you spend as much as you need to spend.
So after this game for Indianapolis, they take on Pittsburgh and then Atlanta and then a bye.
2 of 3 games could be really good.
Honestly, it's not the worst slate of matchups. I'm not nervous about them this week. They're my number 1 DST as well. But we know that secondary has some issues. And so some of these teams that are coming up, they're going to be able to spike Indianapolis for some big yards, kind of like Justin Herbert just did when he threw 50-plus times. So I don't know about spending 15% of fab. But if you need him, you got to get him. No one else in your league is going to spend 10% of fab. I kind of feel dirty even suggesting 10% of fab.
Yeah. If any of you out there spend 15% of your fab on the Colts DST, I will kick you out of your own league. But no, it's fine. All right, let's talk about quarterbacks here. And, a good list. Joe Flacco headlining it. These are guys who are rostered in fewer than 65% of CBS Sports leagues. So Flacco, Mariota, we're expecting him to start. Michael Penix has a bone bruise on his foot, but we're expecting him to start against the Dolphins. J.J. McCarthy, we're not expecting him this week. That's more of a long-term thing. And then in Superflex leagues, you have Tyrod Taylor and Andy Dalton. Jamey, with Flacco facing the Jets, and the Jets not usually seeing a ton of pass attempts, but Joe Flacco throwing 40-plus times almost every time he takes the field. What are you expecting from Flacco this week?
Yeah, averaging 46 passes per game. You're looking at a situation where Sauce Gardner may not play as well. So what we saw last week against the Steelers, hopefully the sign of things to come with Jamar Chase playing like he's used to playing, and T. Higgins, more importantly, looking like the guy that we drafted. It looks like another guy named Joe in this offense. So he's not going to be Joe Burrow, but he's going to get these guys involved and playing at a high level, and that's going to lead to good fantasy production. So the Jets defense, I don't think is anything to worry about, but it's really more about the long-term appeal for Joe Flacco. If he continues to do this, and really more importantly, can they protect him? Because they protected him really well against in the Steelers game. Then he's got the opportunity to find these guys. So I don't know if he's going to be 46 pass attempts based on how the Jets offense will most likely look, but there's still a huge opportunity for him to be above 20 fantasy points and to help you in a time when you're down quarterbacks with the 6 teams on a bye and the guys who are potentially getting benched.
And he's been over 22 fantasy points each of 2 games with Cincinnati so far, so you can't help but think that he'll be right on target and be a borderline top 12 fantasy quarterback this week. And I think he might be close to that even if everybody was playing in week number 8. So he's really been impressive. And his receivers are awesome.
And Adam, when you see this list, there may be some other guys worth taking a look at too, because the Dolphins, we don't know. They're talking about maybe making a change. If Tua gets benched, could be Zach Wilson, could be Quinn Ewers. Again, more super flex, 2 quarterback leagues. And you mentioned the foot injury from Michael Penix. We know Kirk Cousins could be a guy that they turn to, especially with Penix struggling. So this could be the excuse that they need to maybe sit down Penix for a game and let Cousins come in what should be an easy game for them against the Dolphins. So that's another situation to keep an eye on as well.
I thought you were going to talk about Jackson Dart and Aaron Rodgers, who are rostered in 67% of leagues. And I'm sitting there on waivers and looking at one of my lineups, and I got Caleb Williams at quarterback. He laid a total egg last week and Sunday. And, I got to win. I think I'm 4-3 in that league. I'm looking at Jackson Dart. Man, should I pick up Jackson Dart? I just don't know. Something tells me this is just...
Don't start him over Caleb Williams, though.
Why not?
I mean, you say that, but Caleb's had some pretty favorable matchups. Caleb is not playing.
And Baltimore is a favorable matchup still.
It is. They're getting healthier, though.
Yeah, right. Well, we don't know for sure how healthy Baltimore is going to end up being.
I mean,
they get a lot of their guys back.
He's playing against an Eagles team that they upset that's also going to get guys back, and he didn't throw for 200 yards. So, I mean, you're still talking about a guy that, yes, the fantasy production has been there. He's coming off an amazing game against Denver, but he still has one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL, and I'm going to take the guy that's scoring. This team, the Bears, are scoring out of this world right now.
Sure.
So I'm going to stick Caleb Williams. You go ahead with Jackson Dart. I like Dart, but I'm not starting over Caleb Williams.
Are we starting Flacco over both these guys?
No.
I think you can make the cast to absolutely start Flacco over both these guys.
No, I don't trust the Baltimore defense yet at all.
Okay.
Right. They are definitely going to be a lot healthier in the secondary than they were a few weeks ago. All right. So anyway, that's a detour on Caleb Williams, but I guess you have to think about these guys in your lineup. Do you go to Joe Flacco? Do you go to Jackson Dart? Do you go to Aaron Rodgers when you have, who are some other guys that you might be considering benching for them at this point? Just trying to think here.
How about Jordan Love?
Yeah, great one. What do you do?
You bench Jordan Love.
Start Flacco.
Yeah.
But do you drop Jordan Love?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to do something like that. And I don't know if I'd go race to pick up Jordan Love if he were available on waivers. So, yeah. If there were such a thing as the drop-o-meter, he'd be like a 7 on the drop-o-meter.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe I'll throw that into a show one of these days. Last one here with quarterbacks. Definitely don't drop. But any thoughts to sitting Dak Prescott at Denver for any of these waiver wire guys?
Not with the way that he's playing, no. And again, you saw Jackson Dart just have success throwing against them. I know there was some tip passes led to a big play. But in any event, I think the way that Dak is playing right now, and they can, with all the weapons that they have, attack away from Patrick Surtain. If Surtain's going to shadow one of these guys, he may just stay to a side, just knowing how good George Pickens has been as well. But I think if he takes away CeeDee Lamb with Pickens and Ferguson, Dak will still be fine. I don't have him ranked as high as I normally do, but he's still a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, just one more thing on Dart, because he is pretty interesting in terms of, am I a league winner on the waiver wire if I don't add Jackson Dart, who just scored over 30 fantasy points against the Denver Broncos in Denver. Just doesn't. But, okay, one of his touchdowns was the ridiculous Theo Johnson deflection. And then the last one, if I'm not mistaken, was after kind of a bogus pass interference call led to his 1-yard touchdown run. So that's a lot of fantasy points coming off a little bit of luck. Not that he didn't play well, but when I thought about that, I said, maybe let's not overreact. Maybe Jackson Dart's in the 20 to 22 point fantasy point, range on a weekly basis, not someone who's going to win you your league. Okay. Any thoughts on Tyrod Taylor if he starts this week if he starts rest of season? He's been pretty solid. If they get Garrett Wilson back, he's got the Bengals. Dave, is this a kind of a sneaky sleeper out there?
It is a sneaky sleeper, but it's really just for this week. I don't want to trust Tyrod Taylor as anything more than a bye week replacement, a low and number 2 quarterback in my Superflex leagues. But I think Aaron Rodgers really showed us just how favorable of a matchup it is to take on Cincinnati. There's no pass rush pressure. The secondary isn't very good. And even without Garrett Wilson, I think Tyrod Taylor could be okay this week if you're really desperate. If he's the starter.
Yeah, if he's the starter, right. It'd be really nice. The show ends at 2. We could get something out of the Jets before then. That would be much appreciated. Let us know who's starting at quarterback this week. We'll tell you who to start at running back next week when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Kyle Monangai might headline the list for you of waiver wire running backs, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. You need a running back this week? Too bad. But we'll help out anyway. Listen, there is one running back who is 84% rostered in CBS leagues, and it's Aaron Jones, but a little bit better on other websites. ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper. Aaron Jones is rostered in about 76% of leagues. So it's not completely unrealistic to say you can go pick up Aaron Jones. Jamey, if he were available, would he be the number 1 running back to get this week?
I think you have to take that chance, just knowing that he's going to have a big role with the Vikings. And look, he may not be the lead running back. We saw in the first game and a half that he played, Jordan Mason was leading them in carries, but he did have a big role in the passing game, and you still know what he's capable of doing. So given the other options, of guys like, Kyle Monangai and at least for this week, Brashard Smith and Isaiah Davis, clearly you'd want to have Aaron Jones over those players.
Okay, so let's take a look at Jamey's top waiver wire running backs. Kyle Monangai got a very nice split of the workload with Chicago in their Week 7 game, and he's only 29% rostered. These guys are really widely available. Isaiah Davis, number 2. Brashard Smith, 3rd, as we're waiting for a little more info on Kareem Hunt, who left with an injury, then came back, and then everybody sat for the 4th quarter, basically. You have 2 Cardinals on here. You have Zonovan Knight. They're going into their bye, but then they have Dallas when they come back. Zonovan Knight and Trey Benson. First of all, you can drop Michael Carter. I've already done that in a few leagues this morning with my waiver claims. But Benson, hopefully back in a few weeks. Knight, maybe you get a start out of him in Week 9, maybe beyond. We don't know the status of Benson. But all right, Jamey, I'll let you talk about these guys. Are you excited? On a scale of 1 to Colts DST, how excited are you about the running back this week?
I would rather have the Colts DST than these guys. If I could play them in running back, I'd play the Colts DST at running back. I would do that. In the case of these running backs, you're looking at guys that are at best flex options for this week, but they do have some appeal long term, mostly if there's an injury. In the case of Isaiah Davis, maybe there's a trade. I do think what we talked about in the offseason with the Bears, are they going to bring the Lions rushing attack to Chicago? And now you might have that second guy in terms of someone to complement DeAndre Swift, because coming out of their bye week, we've seen an uptick in playing time from Monangai. And then basically, based on what we saw in the game against the Saints, does he now have the ability to be in more of a timeshare? I hope not, because DeAndre Swift has been fantastic, but this was the most snaps that he played. It may have coincided with Swift missing time in practice because of the groin injury, and obviously they did a great job against the Saints. But now they're taking on the Ravens. You guys think the Ravens are back to being Baltimore, it sounds like. I don't think the Ravens defense is going to be as good as it ever is going to be. And then they get the Bengals in Week 9, so it's a 2-week stretch here of maybe positive production for this Bears backfield with Monangai getting a piece of it. In the case of Isaiah Davis, November 4th trade deadline is right around the corner. Breece Hall is going to be one of the names you're going to hear mentioned a lot. And so if they continue to lose, no surprise, we could see Breece Hall traded. Then Isaiah Davis, just based on his role in the depth chart, could be the next man up and the starter. You want to have that on your team. And Brashard Smith, very quietly, 4 straight games with 5.1 PPR points or more. You mentioned Kareem Hunt. We don't know the injury status. They just blew out a team at home in the Raiders. I don't think the Commanders are that bad, even with Marcus Mariota. But if it's Mariota, no McLaurin, no Deebo Samuel, with what the Chiefs look like right now, we could see Brashard Smith getting another opportunity in the fourth quarter as well. So these are guys that might be able to help you for this week. And again, some long-term appeal on top of it.
Dave, you're not going to let him talk about us like that, are you, with that Ravens remark? By the way, all I'm saying, we were talking about Caleb Williams against the Ravens. The last quarterback who faced the Ravens was Matthew Stafford. He scored 11.3 fantasy points.
And lost his best receiver in the game, too.
Right.
They got Marlon Humphrey.
And the weather wasn't good.
He played most of the game, Puka Nacua.
No, he didn't.
He played over half the snaps in that game.
No, he did not.
I'm not even sure if he played even half.
He came back and he didn't. All right, let's make a bet on the air.
Who has more?
Anyway, they got Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey back for that game. And
they also made a trade before the game, and for this one coming up, it looks like Roquan Smith will be back. He's the heartbeat of their run defense. Jamey, you're right about the defensive line for Baltimore. I don't think that they're ever going to be the same as they were from earlier this year. It's just the rest of the defense. I think they'll be better. I don't think they're just going to get stomped like crazy, though, especially to the point where Kyle Monangai sees another career high in touches and fantasy points. Remember, going into Week 7, he was getting 5.4 or fewer PPR points per game, 8 or fewer touches. He is ramping up a little bit more. The Bears' run offense looks great. But I don't know if I want to prioritize getting him off waivers. Maybe if you're desperate for a running back this week. For this week, if you need a running back, Monangai's there, Tyjae Spears is there, and they both might deliver less than 10 PPR points. But at least with Monangai, there's some contingency upside with him, mainly because he's not on the Titans, and if something happens to DeAndre Swift, he would be the main running back in Chicago. So yes, if you are in a pinch this week, he would be the running back to get. I do like Bam Knight. Getting him now, waiting this week if you can, and then using him in Week 9 against Dallas. Arizona should be able to run the ball there against the Cowboys. And then Isaiah Davis is obviously a great stash because Breece Hall not 100%, and if he is, he might be traded. And then Isaiah Davis is the lead back for the Jets, which is okay, I guess, just based on how this Jets offense has been. At least there will be an opportunity there for Isaiah Davis to get 12-plus touches a week if he's the main guy.
Yeah, by the way, you guys owe me a huge apology. Puka Nacua played 50.9% of the snaps. That is most of the game against the Ravens. Tyjae Spears is kind of boring, but he scored 7 and 9 PPR fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. He's facing the Colts, and the Colts allow the fourth most running back targets per game. The Colts are the best offense in football right now statistically, so Cam Ward's actually been throwing a lot lately. He's been throwing to his running backs a lot more. Again, am I excited to start any of these guys? No. But if I'm desperate, I do think Tyjae Spears deserves to be in this discussion as someone who can get me maybe 8 PPR fantasy points, which, believe it or not, might be okay this week.
He might, yeah. I would take the other guys on the list ahead of him, but he certainly has the opportunity and does have some, handcuff lottery ticket appeal. But as we've been saying, like before he came back, Tony Pollard was doing nothing in this amazing role. Is Tyjae Spears ever going to do something amazing in this role? So he's a good bench option. He's a good potential flex option for this week, but I don't have much interest in him outside of maybe the deepest of leagues.
What do you guys think about the Cardinals running backs going forward, Dave?
Well, I think Knight still leads the group in Week 9, and it could be a group of 3. It might be 2. Who knows what the heck these coaches are thinking in Arizona, because they're obviously not good at what they're doing this year so far. And then we know that Trey Benson's eligible to come back Week 10. He might be a little bit later than that because they expressed some pessimism about him being ready. That was a couple of weeks ago. He would be the one, Benson would be the one I'd love to get my hands on just to stash. He might end up being somebody that we start toward the end of the season, somebody when we go into the fantasy playoffs. He could end up being pretty good. But Bam Knight has been all right last 2 games. He's seen the most snap share, and I believe he's had the most fantasy points of these Cardinals running backs so far. So, again, you've got to be desperate at running back to turn to these types of players. But if you've got the time and you've got running back covered for this week and you want somebody who might be okay in Week 9, maybe one of your running backs is on bye in Week 9. Bam Knight would be the one to get now, and I don't think everybody's racing to get him. So you can maybe make him your second or third waiver claim, 5 or 6% of your fab budget. You don't have to prioritize him.
Do you think Trey Benson will be a, borderline league winner, kind of top 12, start him every week player when he's back?
Not top 12.
Top 12, no way.
I think that's a big ask. Top 24, yes. Maybe to the level where James Conner was, that would be the hope. So you're talking about a guy that's hopefully going to dominate the workload, be involved in the passing game. We said this prior to him getting hurt, that the running back for the Cardinals, and it's played itself out. Like Dave said, two of the last 2 games where Bam Knight has been the featured guy, one game was good because he found the end zone. So they find a way to get production from this position, whether in bad matchups, good matchups, passing game work, touchdown opportunities. It's been a good offense for Rob Petzik in finding that running back to be productive. So I think in the case of Benson, I hope he takes over. I hope he's the dominant guy. I hope we don't see Knight or Carter or Dearness Johnson now, being a factor, or DeMercado when he's healthy. So yes, I think there's a huge opportunity to stash Benson and maybe use him down the stretch when hopefully Kyler Murray's back and playing well, and we see this offense operating at a high level.
Well, I got to bring up one thing, and this is about the Cardinals running backs. Seattle, San Francisco, Jacksonville, Tampa, Rams, Houston, Falcons. And then in Week 17 at Cincinnati. So really good matchup in Week 17, but getting there could be really treacherous. Maybe we shouldn't be so excited about these Cardinals running backs.
Except for Dallas in Week 9.
Right, sure.
Very bad. All right, well, thank you for raining on that parade, Dave Richard. Okay, when we come back, let's talk about wide receivers. Dave will rain on the wide receivers, maybe. We'll see. We'll see if we can get excited about something. I think we can. I think we can get very excited. Woo! I put a big bid on Tez Johnson. We'll tell you about it when we come back. All right, we got 10 targets last week for Troy Franklin. He scored a touchdown. We had 7 targets for Jalen Noel. He had 77 yards. We had 9 targets for Tez Johnson. He's 43% rostered, and he turned that into 58 yards and a touchdown, his second straight game with a touchdown. So these are some of the guys we're going to be talking about as we look at the waiver wire wide receivers back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. All right, so obviously with Evans out for most of the season, with Nico Collins in the concussion protocol, Garrett Wilson questionable for this week, with 6 teams on bye, this is brutal. And this is another thing I was saying earlier, Dave, is I'm looking for flexes. I actually like the tight ends, I think, better overall as a group than the wide receivers. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I get it, because I think there's some staying power with Oronde Gadsden and maybe a couple of other guys, maybe more than just 1 week. And with a lot of the wide receivers that we'll talk about, I'm not sure how many of them can be even number 3 receivers for the next 3 weeks, much less past week number 8. So I think a lot of what we're looking at with wide receivers is just who can get you through this troubling spot that we're in, with so many good receivers on bye, so many other wide receivers hurt, a couple of wide receivers playing with inferior quarterbacks. We don't want to trust them. So you've got to go to your waiver wire and find some wideouts. I think at least this week we've got some players that can help.
Okay, let's take a look. Let's look at Jamey's top priorities on the waiver wire. Darnell Mooney. Mooney had 68 yards on 5 targets. He was also wide open for what probably should have been a 42-yard catch, and he would have had a 100-yard game, and he gets the Dolphins this week. Tez Johnson, 43% rostered, as I mentioned. Big opportunity, at least for 1 week. We talked a lot about this on this morning's show, about what to expect from the Bucs passing game going forward. Jalen Noel, also another guy that could be on this list if he were healthy would be Christian Kirk. And we also don't know if Nico Collins is coming back. So that situation's kind of fluid. We have Jawan Jennings is just not doing much of anything, and Ricky Pearsall might be back this week. But Jamey, what's your level of enthusiasm for some of the guys on this list?
I think they all have the opportunity to be number 3 receivers for this week, and then there's potential for some staying power moving forward, which is why I like Mooney the best, just because I think what we saw last year, what the hope would be for the rest of this year. He dealt with the shoulder injury in the last season, hamstring injury so far this year. He's been banged up, and so when he's healthy, the Falcons have showed us they like to concentrate targets to 2 or 3 guys. Can he get back to being the 3rd guy behind potentially Drake London and Bijan Robinson? Kyle Pitts doing a great job, but easily could see Darnell Mooney stepping into that role and getting a bigger opportunity for a team that has been up and down at times. And if their defense is not playing well, maybe we get into a little bit more of some shootout situations, or just taking advantage of a good matchup like we have against Miami this week. Tez Johnson's more of a short-term thing just because we don't know when Chris Godwin will be back. We don't know when Jalen McMillan will be back. But he's looked good. He looked good last week, had the big play the week before against San Francisco. So without Mike Evans there's a huge opportunity for him. It's worth investing in if you're looking for probably the higher ceiling, because I do think if he hits, he's going to probably be better than Darnell Mooney. In the case of Noel, I keep screwing that up, excuse me. In the case of Jalen Noel, you're looking at a team right now that it's down his top 2 receivers. He had his best game of the season against Seattle. And so moving forward, taking on the 49ers this week, we could see a situation where he is the top target getter aside from Dalton Schultz, because I don't think they're going to run the ball with much success against anybody based on how that offensive line looks. So I like the opportunity for him. Don't forget about Jaden Higgins as well. He's going to get a big role if Nico Collins isn't there. I think just in the case of Juwan Jennings, you're right. It's been tough to trust him, but really it's more about what happens when Brock Purdy is back, because Purdy's had the good rapport with Juwan Jennings versus what we've seen from Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne. It's a lot of moving parts as well with this team because George Kittle now back in action. We saw a step back in the passing game for Christian McCaffrey, but that's not going to go away. And so when Pearsall's back, it may be tough to trust. Now, you may be back as well, but Jennings is going to be on the field quite a bit. And then you start to get into some guys that either have been playing well. Josh Downs was somebody we liked last week, suffers a concussion. Daniel Jones playing at MVP level right now. You might want to make sure you have him on your roster. Same thing with Alec Pierce. In the case of both Denver guys, I know Dave likes Marvin Mims more than Troy Franklin. I like Franklin a little bit better this week just because he's been running a few more routes. So we'll see if that continues. But both guys have an opportunity against Dallas this week. I don't want to buy into Leggett or Moore or even, Chimere Dike just because, they had good games in some weird spots. I think in the case of Leggett, for example, you're looking at a guy that took advantage of the non-Sauce Gardner-Jets matchup. He really hadn't done much all season. I think Coker will start to get more involved. And now you have Andy Dalton, but he did have 9 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown. Hard to overlook that type of performance. And maybe Dalton as a more experienced and more polished passer that could help the passing game in general for Carolina. But it's still tough to trust based on what Dalton's shown us the majority of the last couple of seasons.
And Dave, how about you? How do you feel about this list? Do you anticipate adding a lot of these players in your leagues?
Yes, because I've got a lot of players that are on bye this week, and I tried to cover it up a week in advance like I suggested that people do, and I still didn't. I don't like a lot of the receivers that I got. Now I need to go back to the waiver wire to pick them up. Tez Johnson is at the top of the list. He gives Tampa Bay some great speed. They need more of that in their offense, and we saw, Jamey talked about it on Monday, the screen pass they took for a touchdown. The week before, it was a deep ball that Tez Johnson had, and he's been playing a lot. So I think that continues. We know that Jalen McMillan won't be back in his role anytime soon. There was a little bit of pessimism about Chris Godwin being ready from Todd Bowles in his press conference on Tuesday. And so if that's the case, Emeka Buka is going to be the #1 target getter in Tampa, but this guy might be #2, maybe #3, because Cade Otton's going to get in the mix too. And I like him in this situation, but Tez Johnson just does have some downfield speed. I like him as a top 30 wide receiver, #3 type, somebody that can absolutely fill in as a bye week replacement. Now, why do I like Marvin Mims more than Troy Franklin? #1, I like both of them because the matchup against Dallas should be high scoring. The total's right around 50 points, and Bo Nix really came out of his shell in the fourth quarter last week. Been waiting to see him do that. Hopefully that's the start of things to come. But the receiver who really helped him out in that fourth quarter more than anybody was Marvin Mims. He had a couple of big boy catches on the drive. I know that Troy Franklin's been playing a little bit more. Franklin's also been making more mistakes, including a drop in the game, ran a wrong route late in the fourth quarter, did have that nice catch for a touchdown on a target that wasn't intended for him. That was just good awareness by Troy Franklin. They're both going to play a lot, and I'm not going to hate it if you go after Troy Franklin, but I think Marvin Mims, with the speed that he's got and the way that they can kind of scheme things up for him against this bad Dallas secondary, I want to give him the shot this week and figure that he's got a little bit more upside than Troy Franklin.
Okay, there really are a lot of options. And Alec Pierce is someone that we haven't really talked too much about because we're hoping Josh Downs is back this week. But over the past 2 seasons, when Josh Downs has been out, Alec Pierce has been pretty good. And he usually gets a little bit of a bump in targets. It's 4 games now without Josh Downs. And Alec Pierce has 6 or more targets in 3 of those 4 games. I think he has a touchdown in 3 of those 4 games. So keep an eye on whoever that second Colts wide receiver is behind Pittman, obviously behind Tyler Warren, but there's an opportunity there. Jamey, which Broncos wide receiver you prefer, Troy Franklin and Mims? Dave's on the Mims team.
I have them ranked back to back. Again, you're looking at the opportunity here for what this Broncos offense could look like. The only thing that I keep going back to is, as Dave alluded to, Franklin's made some mistakes. They keep playing him over Marvin Mims for a reason. For whatever we've seen through the start of Sean Payton's tenure with Marvin Mims or Marvin Mims' tenure with Sean Payton, he just doesn't seem to play him as much as he deserves to. He's been fantastic. You go back to the end of last season, you saw some flashes. When he hits big. He's got 2 games with over 15 fantasy points in his last 4 outings. But I just don't know why they want to continue to play Franklin there. And because of that, and because of the matchup, because he'll be on the field a little bit more, especially if they're playing with a lead, I could see I could see Troy Franklin having a bigger opportunity this week. So I like him just one spot ahead, but I have no problem picking up both.
All right, and then let's talk a little bit more about the Bucs here. Have you guys had any time to think about this since we spoke about it this morning?
Sure.
Any changes of opinion? Because I am pretty eager to add Tez Johnson. In one league where I'm 2-5, I put a pretty aggressive bid in on him. I can't say because Jamey's in the league, but it's most of my remaining. I'm desperate. I'm desperate here, and I think he could be really good this week. I think he could be really good if he plays, if he gets opportunities. Does Godwin scare me? I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I just don't know what to expect from Chris Godwin. So Johnson, to me, of all these guys that I see, Johnson, and I guess I'd say Juwan Jennings just because of his history, they feel like guys that could be in my lineup, for more than 1 week, actually have some staying power. But Dave, how are you feeling about the Bucs?
I like Tez Johnson the best. I'd have some trepidation about spending, let's call it 20-25% of your fab to get him, because I'm a little bit worried about him being a factor for the rest of the season in Tampa. We don't know how things are going to work out, but it doesn't sound like A, Chris Godwin's going to be back, and B, even if Godwin's back, Johnson and Godwin do not play the same role. So if Godwin comes back, I think that hurts Otten more than anything else. But I also don't know how much Godwin will even play, how many targets he'll actually get. And I think Tez Johnson has really impressed them, and they need playmakers right now in that offense. They need somebody to catch the ball and do something with it other than Emeka Egbuka. I think they were counting on Mike Evans to be that guy, and now that Evans is out for a while, unfortunately, I think Tez Johnson's going to get that first chance. If you're desperate, you're 2-5, you need a win, you're holding on to slim hopes in your fantasy league, okay, then maybe you've got to spend what you've got to spend to get him. But if you overspend now, that's fab that you're not going to have later. And if you make him your number 1 waiver claim now, are you going to miss out on a DST that you need this week or a quarterback that you need this week? Now, it goes without saying. If you only need a wide receiver, that's it. Yeah, your number 1 waiver claim should be Tez Johnson. I think it'll work out for you. But you just have to balance it out a little bit when you go to set your waivers tonight. How badly do you need him versus other positions for your lineup this week and beyond?
I just want to go back to something you said, Adam. Staying power in your lineup for more than just this week. They have a bye in week 9, and that gives them their time to get these guys healthy. And you say you don't fear Chris Godwin. I don't think that that's the wrong thing to say from what the production...
I said I was in the middle, kind of iffy on it.
Well, it's not necessarily about... It wouldn't shock me if Tez Johnson's better than Chris Godwin, because Godwin coming back from now 2 significant injuries. But will Chris Godwin play more than Tez Johnson and limit the upside for Tez Johnson? There's a reason he hasn't been commanding targets, even with Godwin in and out of the lineup, Mike Evans in and out of the lineup. Obviously, this team, we've said this for the last couple of years, like, as good as these guys have been, it hasn't been because they've been 12 target guys, 15 target guys. It's been because they've been very productive in the targets that they've gotten. And hopefully that'll be the case for Tez Johnson. But we also may see this team with Todd Bowles. Remember, it's still another offense coordinator now going through what is the biggest crisis situation that they've dealt with because of this receiving core. Thankfully, they have a lot of depth. But they just kind of go back to, especially when Bucky Irving's back, let's be conservative, let's run the ball. It's been great that Baker Mayfield's been in the MVP conversation. Maybe he's in the MVP conversation because they win the division and still could lock up the 1 seed in the NFC. It may not be because he has to be heroic and save them in these comeback efforts, now with this receiving core being what it is. So I do think Tez Johnson for this week can be very good, but very good as a high-end number 3 receiver. Just keep that in mind. Can he be very good when everybody's healthy and no teams on a bye, or minimal teams on a bye, and you're getting some guys back from a health standpoint? To Dave's point, like, unfortunately, we're going to deal with injuries again and again and again, and you just may not want to blow all your fab on a player that only has a 1-week window to help you.
Yeah. No, I'm not blowing all my fab on him. This is one league where I'm desperate for a win and desperate for any spark, and it's a deep league, and there's not a lot on the waiver wire.
Colts DST is not there to save you?
No, it's the IDP league, so I could try to pick up every member of the Colts DST, but I can't pick up the Colts DST. All right, we're going to take a break. We have some potential quarterback news to tell you about, plus tight ends to add after this on Fantasy Football Today. Back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, and we have some quarterback news. It's not official, but Rich Stimini, who covers the Jets, says that Aaron Glenn is moving toward naming Tyrod Taylor as his starter, according to sources. So be prepared for that. Dave, is that good news, bad news, or indifference news for Garrett Wilson if he's back?
It's good news. We need somebody who's going to actually throw a football when somebody gets open instead of holding onto the ball and then getting sacked 9 times in a game. So it's going to be it's still going to be the same mantra from the coaching staff. Throw the ball to Garrett Wilson. They will do that, and Garrett Wilson will have good numbers. Josh Reynolds, a desperation receiver this week. If you can't get your hands on Tez Johnson and the other 17 guys that we talked about in the previous segment.
And I will say this. Obviously, I was very wrong on Justin Fields last week. Don't drop Fields just yet, because if he does start against the Bengals and does get Garrett Wilson back, it's as good a matchup as you'll find. And so he could still have one of those games against this defense this week.
It's also a great matchup for Mason Taylor, which brings us into our tight ends to add. And Taylor's not at the top of the list, but he is certainly on the list. Oronde Gadsden Jr., this guy is a freak. He looks great out there. Big game for him, for Oronde Gadsden. We also like Cade Otton, Dalton Schultz, who, just 3 straight games with 6 targets before yesterday's game where he kind of went off, and Nico Collins now in the concussion protocol. Then we have Mason Taylor, Juwan Johnson, Colson Loveland, Theo Johnson, Pat Freiermuth. Jamie, how many of these guys are top 15 tight ends this week?
All of them. You're looking at great opportunities for all of them. So Gadsden, the hope would be is that the run game continues to struggle, and we still see Justin Herbert leading on all 4 of his targets in some capacity of the 3 receivers. And Gadsden, it's been 2 solid weeks for him, one without Quentin Johnston, one with everybody there, and he threw the ball 55 times. I know you talked about this on our podcast. Be a little bit cautious because of the pass attempts being up, but this is also a position. Will Dissly was somebody we were starting on a low-end variety last year, and Gadsden's a much better player than Will Dissly, so there's a chance for him to have not just short-term value, but long-term value. In the case of Cade Otton, there's short-term value and long-term value. He's been good every time Mike Evans has been off the field, and we know Evans not going to be there, so whether it's Tez Johnson or Chris Godwin coming back, maybe Cade Otton, who's got 3 straight games with 10-plus PPR points, can be a solid fantasy contributor. Dalton Schultz, 8-plus PPR points in 4 straight games, 2 with 11-plus PPR points. You said this prior to the week, Adam, take advantage of the Seattle matchup. Well, he certainly did. And then when you have no Christian Kirk and then Nico getting hurt, this is the only guy C.J. Stroud was consistently leaning on. We got some plays from Jalen Knoll, but consistently it was Dalton Schultz. And in the case of Mason Taylor, I know he's burned us the last 2 weeks. He was terrible against Denver and London. He was slightly better in the game against the Giants this past weekend. In the game against Panthers this past weekend. But I think there's still a huge opportunity. The Bengals have allowed 7 touchdowns to tight ends in their last 3 games, 9 on the season. So Tyrod Taylor will hopefully be better for Mason Taylor, but really just the opportunity against this defense. 4 touchdowns for the Steelers tight ends last week. 4 for the Steelers tight ends. Mason Taylor's going to get a lot of targets and have a chance to be really good this week.
It's interesting, Adam, because you've got to list those 4 tight ends. They're all definitely startable, not only as tight ends, but also as flexes in fantasy leagues. And the only one that I think is going to get a lot of attention from fantasy managers is Gadsden. And he's the one that does have plenty of long-term appeal. You don't think so? You think that maybe...
No, I think after the injury last night. If you had said this yesterday afternoon, Sunday night, I totally agree with you. But I think after what happened with Cade Otton and then with Dalton Schultz, you have 2 injuries at the wide receiver position. Both those guys played really well. There's going to be a lot of people looking at all 3 of those.
I understand what you're saying. I think that just people are going to see the numbers, the raw numbers for Gadsden, and they're going to gravitate toward that. And I think that's a mistake. I think Otton can have a better week than Gadsden. And I think that Schultz can be double-digit PPR points. I kind of think Mason Taylor could be double-digit PPR points too. The point that I'm making is that if you're just looking for a 1-week replacement, you're streaming tight ends, you don't have to be one of the people that drops a 10 or 15% fab bid for Gadsden. You can save your money, and you could use your waiver claim on other positions and then go back and try and get one of Otton, Schultz, and Taylor while you let the rest of your league get Gadsden. I don't know if I view Gadsden as a league winner just because these 2 big games, they've been wonderful, but we've also seen some situational things happen for the Chargers that have led to these opportunities to Gadsden, and I don't know if we can count on 55 passes a game for Justin Herbert every single week. In fact, you can't. It's going to be in the neighborhood of 35. That might be 6 or 7 targets per game for Oronde Gadsden, and sometimes those games won't be as pretty.
The one thing I will say, though, Adam, and this is the fascinating part of it for this position for this week, because we know we've been chasing this all season. We're chasing it almost forever, trying to find the next great tight end who you can start in your fantasy leagues. You have 3 prominent tight ends on a bye this week, and in the case of Brock Bowers, not just on a bye, but injury. So you have no Sam Laporta, you have no Trey McBride, you have no Brock Bowers. How many of those managers are going to overpay for these guys versus the managers who need the tight ends that may have to overpay for those guys? So the bidding war that we may see for this particular position for this week only, and if you miss on these guys, those managers may be dropping these guys in a week. You may be able to get them back cheap next week, especially if they do struggle. But just keep in mind, Oden's on a bye in week 9, and Mason Taylor's on a bye in week 9. So you're not going to have those guys for next week, so just keep that in mind with your fab bids.
Okay. Well, that's a good look at the tight end position. It's deep on the waiver wire this week. It's actually kind of deep a lot of weeks, so keep that in mind. And we'll come back. We'll answer your questions to finish things off here on Fantasy Football Today. We'll be right back. We'll answer some of your questions now. This is from Jason. At what point of the season do we start stashing backups for our running backs for the playoffs?
If you're above 500, you like the way your roster looks like right now, it's not a bad move, which is why you're looking at guys like Kyle Monangai, and think about the situation we went through last week where everybody was panicked trying to get Emmanuel Wilson. If you already have that on your roster, you're in a great spot. So if you can carry these backups, I have one team where I am in second place. I don't remember my record is because we play 2 matchups every week, but I'm in second place. My only running backs right now, and they're past their bye weeks. I have the 2 Steelers guys, I have the 2 Bears guys, and Ramondre Stevenson. Those are all my running backs. And everything, I'm loaded at receiver, good quarterback, good tight end, but those are the only backfields I have, and I have them locked up, and I'm perfectly happy with it.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to go about it. I always love to try and consolidate my rosters and try and trade up my good depth with a starter for one big starter from somebody else's team. And then when I've got that bench space, that's when I go and I get my backups for my running backs. By week 15, you want to have them on your, that's the fantasy playoffs. Probably closer to like week 12, week 13 is when you'd want to have those backups locked up.
All right. Next question. Yeah, Alec Manor is droppable. But this actually brings up another talking point here. What if Calvin Ridley were available? He's 70% rostered in CBS leagues. Anybody want to take a chance on Calvin Ridley?
I have a hard time being excited about any Titans player, especially if I'm thinking about somebody that might actually be a regular starter for my fantasy team. I don't know if one such player exists. And I thought Chimere DK looked better than Io Manor last week. He's an interesting guy to look at in those long-term leagues.
Okay. Would you pick up Calvin Ridley or Tez Johnson?
Tez by a mile.
Okay. This is probably from last night. I said Jamison Williams, but of course the answer was Emeka Ibuka. So guys, should we drop Mr. No Catch, Jamison Williams, going into his bye?
If he is one of the last players on your roster, then yes, you can drop him. Especially in 10-team leagues, you can move on from him. But I think if you're looking at it, Dave said this earlier on the show this morning, if you see Jamison Williams on your waiver wire, you still want to buy into what he can be.
Yes.
But at this point, if I need somebody for this week, and Tez Johnson's there, and Jamison Williams the last player, because I want to hold on to a handcuff, or I want to hold on to a second tight end because of whatever the situation may be, unfortunately, it's just one of those situations where he's burned us enough where you can move on from him. He's in that same category as a DJ Moore, as a Calvin Ridley, players that we had some high expectations for and just not delivering.
Oh, it's so bad. Do you still feel like, just real quick, that Jamison Williams could have a huge second half?
Yes.
Kind of a winner? Yeah.
Absolutely could.
Yeah, it could always happen.
Right.
They don't throw that much. I think they have 2 games this year with more than 30 pass attempts. Obviously, they love to run the ball. They can run the ball on pretty much anyone. And it's a problem. Remember, when everyone was going off last year, throwing a ton, their defense had fallen apart. And that's it for Fantasy Football today. We're back on CBS Sports Network Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern with some rankings. If you enjoyed the show, please check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. A lot of thank yous to give out today. Of course, Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. Thanks to you guys for your great work. And thanks to all of you at home for watching. I'm Adam Aizer, and we'll talk to you next time on Fantasy Football Today. Have a great day, everyone.